The mechanical shark almost never worked. Steven Spielberg spent 5 months on the ocean off Martha's Vineyard filming Jaws. The Shark 3 fiberglass models, collectively nicknamed Bruce, had been built for freshwater testing and began to corrode the moment it entered the sea. Crew members tracking its failures communicated by walkie-talkie across the set. The message, according to Richard Dreyfuss, was always the same: the shark is not working. And then, the shark never worked. The film that came out of that production in June 1975 was the first to gross more than $100 million in its original release. It spent 14 consecutive weeks at number 1. It invented the summer blockbuster. And almost everything that made it frightening, the restraint, the suggestion, the music, the way the shark stays hidden until the third act, was not a creative choice. It was a solution to a problem that almost ended the film entirely. But the broken shark was not the only thing Spielberg cut. He filmed scenes he chose not to use. He removed footage he decided was too violent. And one of those decisions made quietly, in an editing room, about a sequence that has never been officially released, changed the shape of one of the most effective sequences in the film. Number 1, the film that almost wasn't made. Jaws began production in May 1974 on the island of Martha's Vineyard off the coast of Massachusetts. It was the first major motion picture to be shot primarily on the open ocean, not in a studio tank, not on a controlled set, but in actual seawater. Spielberg was 26 years old. Jaws was only his second theatrical feature film. The studio had budgeted the production at between $3.5 and $4 million. The script was still being written as principal photography began. Co-screenwriter Carl Gottlieb was revising pages on set throughout the shoot. The plan was 55 shooting days. The production ran to 159. The budget by the end had reached approximately $9 million, more than double the original estimate. Spielberg later described the experience as the toughest production he had ever encountered. When the shoot finally ended, he said, he had a full panic attack on the ferry leaving Martha's Vineyard, shaking and unable to breathe. The shark that was supposed to carry the film through its second act spent most of the production on the seafloor or under repair. The salt water had corroded its mechanics within days of the first shoot. Everything the film eventually relied on to create fear, the barrels, the point-of-view shots, the music was invented in response to the fact that the central prop did not work. Number 2, the shark that was never there. 3 mechanical sharks were built for Jaws. They were collectively nicknamed Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer Bruce Raymer. They were designed and tested in a freshwater tank in California. They worked in freshwater. On Martha's Vineyard in the Atlantic Ocean, they did not. The salt water entered the mechanics and caused corrosion almost immediately. The hydraulic systems that controlled the shark's movement failed constantly. The creatures sank. They had to be retrieved from the seafloor more than once. Crew members with walkie-talkies tracked the failures in real time, and the signal that went out across the set, heard by cast, crew, and locals who had gathered to watch, became the production's running announcement: the shark is not working. Spielberg's response, worked out over weeks of failure, was to stop trying to show the shark and instead find ways to imply its presence. The yellow barrels that marked the creature's position in the water, the point-of-view shots from beneath the surface. John Williams' 2-note theme, which signals the shark's approach before anything is visible. The decision to withhold the shark's first full reveal until the third act. All of these, the defining techniques of one of cinema's most effective thrillers, were not in the original plan. They were invented because the mechanical shark kept sinking. Number 3, the music he almost refused. John Williams had already worked with Spielberg on The Sugarland Express, the director's previous feature. For Jaws, Williams composed a score that would become one of the most instantly recognizable in cinema history. When he first played the 2-note motif on the piano for Spielberg, the E and F that signal the shark's approach, Spielberg thought he was joking. The simplicity of it seemed wrong. 2 notes, back and forth, barely a melody. Spielberg laughed. Then Williams played it again, explained what he intended, and Spielberg understood. The genius of the Jaws theme is not complexity, it is inevitability. The two notes repeat and accelerate, and the acceleration is the shark's acceleration. The approach from distance to impact, metronomic and unstoppable. It works without any image at all. It works in a swimming pool where there is no shark and no ocean. It has been working in that way for 50 years. Williams won the Academy Award for Best Original Score for Jaws. He was conducting the orchestra at the ceremony the night he won and had to step away from the podium to accept his award. The theme he had proposed as a joke, the one that Spielberg almost dismissed, is now the second most recognized piece of film music in history after the Star Wars March. Williams composed that one too. Number 4, the scene that was too much. The estuary attack is one of the most disturbing sequences in Jaws as it exists in the film. Chief Brody's son, Michael, is sailing with friends when the shark arrives. A man in a paddle boat, played by stuntman Ted Grossman, is pulled into the water. The sequence ends with the severed leg of the man sinking slowly toward the ocean floor, and a final point-of-view shot of the shark passing inches from Michael's traumatized face. In the version Spielberg filmed, it did not end there. The original sequence continued, with the man re-emerging from the water and the shark's jaws gripping Michael, unable to let go, both of them pushed across the surface as the shark drove forward. The man gushes blood. He finally shoves the child free. The shark drags the man under. Spielberg filmed this. He reviewed it in the editing room. He removed it. In an interview about the production, he described the extended footage as, in his assessment, in bad taste, too much detail, too much blood, a violation of the restraint the film had worked to establish. The scene as cut was frightening. The scene as filmed, he concluded, was simply too violent. The footage was never officially released. It surfaced publicly for the first time in 2015 in a making-of documentary included with the 40th anniversary Blu-ray release, where Grossman describes the concept and Spielberg explains his decision to cut it. Number 5, the child who was eaten on screen. The death of Alex Kintner, the boy on the yellow inflatable raft, is one of the film's most shocking moments. His attack is the sequence that establishes the shark as something that kills indiscriminately. Not only at night, not only adults, not only people who have wandered away from the group, but a child in daylight, in front of a crowded beach. In the version Spielberg filmed, it was more explicit. The boy's death was shown on screen, the shark visible, the consumption of the child depicted directly. Spielberg removed the footage. The reason, according to accounts of the editing process, was closely related to the same principle that governed the estuary cut. Showing the shark fully at this early point in the film would undermine the tension the rest of the production relied on. The decision was simultaneously a creative one and a practical one. The shark barely worked on camera anyway, and showing it clearly in the second act was not yet an option the production could reliably execute. The scene in the released film cuts away at the moment of impact. The result is more frightening than what was filmed. The audience's imagination, working in the gap between the cut and the screaming crowd on shore, produces something worse than any image Spielberg could have put on screen. The missing footage in this case made the film. Number 6, the monologue nobody agrees on. Quint's USS Indianapolis monologue is regarded by many as one of the finest speeches in American cinema. Robert Shaw, seated in the hold of the Orca as the three men share stories and scars, describes surviving the sinking of the Indianapolis, a real World War II disaster in which over 300 men were killed by sharks over 4 days in the Pacific after their ship was torpedoed. The speech was not in Peter Benchley's original novel. The idea of grounding Quint's hatred of sharks in a real historical event came from uncredited screenwriter Howard Sackler, who mentioned the Indianapolis incident to Spielberg and wrote an early version. From that point, the account of what happened next is fiercely disputed. Spielberg says John Milius dictated a 10-page version of the speech over the phone, which Shaw then cut in half. Carl Gottlieb, the film's credited co-screenwriter, says Shaw himself wrote the final version, that multiple drafts were produced by various writers. Shaw read them all, then came in one night at dinner, performed his version at the table, and Spielberg said that was what they were shooting. Shaw was a successful playwright in his own right, and the final monologue has the cadence of someone who understood how to write for the stage. The speech was filmed twice, across 2 separate days. The version in the film is the second recording. Shaw delivered it, by most accounts, in a single, uninterrupted take. The crew fell silent when he finished. Number 7. The film that invented the blockbuster. Jaws was released on June the 20th, 1975. Universal distributed it in approximately 460 cinemas simultaneously, a wide national release on a scale that was unusual at the time. When prestige films often opened slowly in limited engagements and expanded over weeks, the studio supported the release with a television advertising campaign that reached millions of viewers in advance. The film was number 1 at the box office for 14 consecutive weeks. It became the first film in history to gross more than $100 million in its original release. It earned approximately $495 million worldwide over its lifetime. Film historians and industry analysts point to Jaws as the origin of the summer blockbuster model, the wide release, the heavy pre-opening marketing, the targeting of the summer calendar as the peak commercial season. Before Jaws, studios released their prestige films in autumn and winter. After Jaws, summer was where the money was. Steven Spielberg was 28 years old when it came out. Number 8. What the Shark Looked Like. Bruce, or rather, the 3 Bruces, were each 25 feet long and weighed approximately 1,200 pounds. They were built in fiberglass, over a steel armature, and operated by a team using pneumatic and hydraulic systems. Each one required a crew of technicians to operate, and each one, in saltwater, failed consistently. The shark's appearance in the film, the full reveal when Brody is chumming at the stern and the creature rises out of the water behind him, was not planned as the first time audiences would see the shark. It happened naturally in the editing. Spielberg and editor Verna Fields had withheld the shark for so long and built so much dread around its absence that when it finally appeared, the effect was overwhelming. Chief Brody's line in that moment, stepping backward into the cabin and telling Quint, flatly, that they are going to need a bigger boat, was improvised by Roy Scheider during filming. It was not in the script. Spielberg kept it. The shark as built was never quite right. The model's skin looked artificial in certain lighting conditions, and the crew went to considerable lengths to avoid angles that made it obvious. The limitations of what Spielberg had to work with shaped every decision about when and how briefly to show it. Number 9. The restraint that was forced on him. Every major creative decision that defines Jaws as a film came from constraint. The shark was shown less because it did not work. The score was 2 notes because Williams proposed simplicity and Spielberg initially resisted it. The extended estuary footage was removed because Spielberg decided it went too far. The Alex Kintner sequence was cut at the moment of impact because the shark was unreliable and the restraint turned out to be more effective than the alternative. This is the paradox at the center of one of cinema's most studied productions. A film that works because of what was removed, what failed, and what was never shown. Spielberg did not arrive on Martha's Vineyard intending to make a film about suggestion and implication. He arrived intending to show a shark. The shark would not cooperate. So he made the film that the shark's failures required, and that film became, by almost any measure, a more frightening and more durable piece of work than the one he had planned. The deleted footage, the discarded takes, and the scenes that exist only in the 40th anniversary making of are the record of what Jaws was supposed to be. The film that came out is what happened when most of it did not work. Number 10. What was never officially released. The extended estuary footage, the section of the attack sequence that Spielberg filmed and removed, has never been officially released by Universal. It appeared in the Making of documentary, included with the 40th anniversary Blu-ray in 2015 as behind-the-scenes context, test footage, descriptions from the crew. Spielberg's own explanation of why he cut it. But the footage itself, the filmed sequence, in the form it would have appeared in the film, has not been officially published. The same is true of the original Alex Kintner sequence, the extended version of the Chrissy Watkins opening attack. Several character scenes between Brody and his wife that were cut for pacing. These exist in the production archive, which is held by Universal. What the 40th anniversary release confirmed is that Spielberg made deliberate choices about what to remove, and that those choices were creative decisions grounded in a specific principle. The shark should be implied more than shown, and violence should be suggested more than depicted. The scenes he cut were cut because they violated that principle, not because they failed technically. Jaws has been on video since the early 1980s. It has been restored, reissued, and celebrated for 50 years. The footage that was removed remains where it has been since the editing room on Martha's Vineyard, out of sight in the archive behind the film that everyone knows.